Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
The legalization of recreational cannabis that went into effect last month can open doors for your career. If you are already in the industry or wondering what is the best path to break into the cannabis field, well, the University of Rhode Island has a program to help you become highly competitive in numerous areas of the cannabis industry. Fully accredited by URI's College of Pharmacy, the certificate program is 100% online and can be completed in 2 semesters. The next application date for the summer 2023 session is April 4th, and courses start on May 9th. Learn more at URI/online/cannabis or give them a call at 401-874-5280. All right, so here we are, season 6 of Bartholomew Town, and who better to kick it off than the one and only Dan McGowan of the Boston Globe. Good morning, sir. Happy New Year. I guess we can say Happy New Year still.
We can still say Happy New Year, and I continue to say this every time I'm on the show, Bill. I think I am now the record holder for the number of appearances on your show. I think I at least have to be in the top 5, so I'm honored.
Yeah, I would say that's a good statistic for somebody out there to crunch the numbers on. But in terms of total minutes, I think you definitely have won that one.
Well, that's because I talk too much.
So it is. So here we are. You know, it's interesting. Coming off of an election year, there's always this reflection that I do, where I say always, as in the last 4 or 5 years, post-election year. How do you approach the next year, the ensuing season? Obviously, there's a lot of governmental things happening and politics are always at play. But, you know, when you look to this year, we're past inaugurations and we're into the McKee administration proper. The Smiley administration has begun. The election season drama is over. So now what? What's the big story?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's never a shortage of controversy that comes up that like gives us things to cover. So you know that from, especially now doing lots of radio every day, like, look, the beat goes on, we always have to find the next interesting story. But it is true that, I always think the even numbered years in Rhode Island tend to be, far more interesting because you have those are your election years, right? Whether they're, in Rhode Island's sort of beautifully run, at least for the media, in a way of, 2 years from now, you're going to have a light local election season, but you have all the General Assembly, so that's interesting. And then, of course, you have a presidential election, so that's fun. And then 2 years after that, you've got another, all the statewide officers up. So we always have something to cover and be looking towards. So, I think it won't be long before we start talking a lot about who might run again in a couple of years and things like that. But it right now becomes, a little bit of, let's see how Governor McKee, begins to govern with a fully 4-year term. What happens with Mayor Smiley? And, he's kind of promised to get away from some of the like bigger ticket kind of gimmicky things that Mayor Lorza really supported. So, when do we actually start to see that change? And so I think right now it's a little bit of a holding pattern. We're all looking for interesting angles to cover, but it's the newness right now that is the story.
Definitely. And I think the inauguration speeches, and you had a really fun piece in Roadmap today that analyzes the gubernatorial inauguration speeches. Something that jumped out to me as I was covering Inauguration Day on the radio was Greg Amore's speech, which seems so fitting in terms of democracy is not a given and elections are not necessary. The fact that we take elections as something that are trustworthy and are protected by institutions is not a given. That sort of summarizes a major point of his. We see what's happening in Brazil. We see what's happening as we look back on January 6th and all just this angle of, the media is fake news and, the Secretary of State rigs the elections here in Rhode Island. How much of that is lingering and kind of just permeates throughout all the discussion and just sort of the general public's perspective of everything that's happening right now?
I think very little, in the sense
Hmm.
that with the exception of, I think, a handful of fringe people really 2 years ago, not so much in this election. You saw a little bit from Bob Lancia when he ran against Jim Langevin. I went to bed and I was in the lead and didn't know
Right.
that mail ballots exist, or whatever he did. With the exception of the fringe folks, I don't think in Rhode Island you've had like a crisis of confidence in your elections. That said, I do think that Secretary Amore is going to have to at least take a harder look at kind of the way we do our mail ballots, the window of how early voting works. Something that that certainly Speaker Shekarchi has said, maybe it's a little too long, things like that. Because we have to remember something. I think you and I have talked about this before, but the truth is that when people say there's rampant election fraud, I would say that's not true.
Yep.
But for people who say there is zero, you hear that a lot, particularly during the presidential. I think you heard this a lot on CNN. You would hear zero evidence of election fraud. And I always cringed at that, because as a local journalist, I've literally seen it happen. There was a city council candidate a couple of years ago got arrested for election fraud.
Right.
He was doing something with mail ballots, I believe, is how it worked out. That was in Providence. That happened, right? There, you can't deny it. It wasn't dismissed. And so, I always kind of cringe with the idea of, everything being absolute, never or always. I think there are ways for Secretary Morey to try to have these conversations. Should we be allowing, essentially candidates or campaigns to collect mail ballots, things like that? There are all those conversations that can happen. The good news is, though, Rhode Island, I think, has run pretty fair and safe elections. Secretary Gorbea did a pretty good job, a really good job of doing this. I think Secretary Morey can kind of continue that. So, we're not going to have questions, at least I don't think, we're not going to have questions about, sort of rampant fraud or did the speaker win this election, things like that,
Right.
the governor win this. But there are ways to it's not the sexiest kind of topic. I don't think that this gets, major attention from the two of us every day, but I think there are probably ways to have that conversation with his former colleagues in the legislature.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. And it does seem like it's a little bit in the phone booth. You hear it in certain sections of the media and or segments of the media kind of repeated regularly. And then you're like, well, the reality is, like you said, it's there, but is it really a dominant issue? Is it really something that, people that are out at Twin Oaks having dinner with a group of friends, are they actually talking about this? Or are they talking about, whether or not the Patriots need a new quarterback?
No, I think that's right. I mean, literally, I don't think anybody is really talking about this,
Right.
Broadly. There are reasonable debates to be had. Go back to the Democratic primary last year. I think that you could have an interesting argument about early voting and where Helena Foulkes would have maybe fallen, and how it could have worked for her. That said, I always remind people who vote early, if they didn't have the option, a very big majority of them would have still voted. Right. Mm-hmm. So, like, yes, you can organize more. Yes, we can now point to early voting in a way that maybe we couldn't in previous years. But look, if you were a strong union household and you had 3 or 4 voters in that household, it didn't matter that you voted 3 weeks early, because you were probably going to vote on election day and you were probably going to vote for Dan McKee. And so the numbers would change for the election day numbers. I'm not sure that they would guarantee to change the results. I would argue, and I you and I think the last time I was on your show, we talked about the kind of the surge of Helena Foulkes. If she had 2 more weeks or a month to run the race, sure, maybe she could have pulled it out. She needed to know when election day was, and her team did not.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. So you have an interesting story that, I don't know if you broke it is the right way to put it, but you certainly raised it. And this is the Frank Caprio, the Judge Caprio. Everybody knows caught in Providence. And, there's even clips that float around on TikTok and YouTube reels and things, or YouTube shorts and Instagram reels. So it's like, it has a new energy almost that of an audience that maybe didn't know about the show or something like that, or didn't watch it. So more and more people I know are talking about it, but it's been there forever. Judge Caprio, caught in Providence. People come in some, they've got, red light camera ticket, and they come in and they tell their life story, and the judge, usually pardons them in one way, shape, or form. So talk about that story, because it's now become, we were talking offline, it's become something bigger than it was a couple of weeks ago, and nothing has really changed.
Yeah, this is kind of, it's a fascinating, I want to talk about like interesting local, a story that, that we didn't see coming, that, gives us something to talk about for a little while. Really, the story of the Providence like municipal court system is a fascinating political one that, as somebody who's covered the city of Providence for a really long time, I've paid attention to every 4 years, right? Every 4 years, the judges come up. There's 3 of them or 4 of them who come up, who are appointed and confirmed by the city council, right? So it's a political game. You have to have votes to get on you have to have 8 votes, majority of the council, to get on the bench. And Judge Caprio, of course, has been there forever. Judge Caprio is a former city council member. I believe he was appointed to the municipal court bench in 1985. So it's the year before I was born.
Yeah.
And but in recent years, obviously, the show Caught in Providence, which has been on forever but has had commercial success only in the last, let's say 5 or 6 years, has really taken hold. I mean, his numbers on downloads and views are things that you and I would kill for, whether it's your podcast or, my open rate in my newsletter. He does big numbers, which in theory probably equals good business for the company that produces the show. The company that produces that show happens to be owned by his brother. And his brother went to the ethics commission and said, hey, a couple of years ago, and said, hey, I want to profit off of this commercially. Can I? Got clearance from the ethics commission. There was no talk about numbers or anything like that. That wasn't the purview of the commission. The commission just said, yes, you can do this. No, the judge cannot make a penny off of this, which he says he does not. And you take him at his word for that. And anybody else can do this too. So Bill Bartholomew could take his podcast and cover the municipal courts and probably come up with very interesting stories from the municipal court as well. And you could film it, and potentially you could, if you could find a suitor, you could, you could produce that and make money off of it. Where it has popped up it recently is it's another term, right? So you have another term of the new city council, new city council president, Rachel Miller. And you have some jockeying for position on the bench. Who wants to be the chief judge? Representative John Lombardi, former city council person from the neighborhood that Rachel Miller represents. By the way, Judge Caprio also represented that neighborhood when he was on the council. So there's some movement here. John Lombardi is doing what politicians can do, what any potential judge can do. I think he, believes he's got the votes to be the municipal court, the chief judge. I believe you get a little bit of an extra pay there, but it's not a huge number. It's $40,000, $50,000 some odd $1,000. It's not a big number, relatively speaking. And so it looked like he was going to kind of sail through and become the chief judge. I had heard about this actually leading up to inauguration day last week, confirmed it on inauguration day that this is kind of what was going to happen, and that Judge Caprio was likely to be moved into this chief judge emeritus role, a semi-retired type of position. I called the judge. He said, yeah, that's what, I think is going to happen. The challenge is that you have to remember that, again, it all comes down to what the city council says. And so there was some pushback, right? I wrote about it and I pointed out a lot of the, just simply, here's what happens. The show does make money. And didn't cast any dispersions on it. I don't really care that much about how much is made, but it is a legitimate question. I think some of the members of the council saw that, got a little bit worried. I think the rumor mill started to heat up, as it does when interesting tales are told. And suddenly now you've got a situation where, at least as you and I talked today on January 9th, I'm not sure Judge Caprio has the votes to be reappointed or appointed into this job that would be newly created. Emeritus would be newly created. And so, the vote has been put off for at least a couple of weeks, and it's just something to track because it's an interesting, it's got some commercial appeal, it's got some politics in it, and it happens to be a really slow time, so it gives us something to talk about.
Definitely. And it's interesting because the creation of a role, Judge Emeritus, is, I hate to say, but it almost seems like it'd be the full Rhode Island to just like, we need to figure out a way to keep this guy on the bench in some capacity so this show can continue. So let's just create a role out of thin air. And to the best of my knowledge, and you would know this, I think, better than anyone, there's no example of a judge emeritus in municipal court that's ever existed. It's not like there isn't currently a retired judge who's on the bench. Going back in municipal history, has there been such a position ever?
No, I don't believe there has. I mean, at the same time, there hasn't been a Frank Caprio Sr. in history ever before this, right? And so, in some ways, look, Judge Caprio is 86 years old. He's got this kind of commercial appeal to him. He's a generally beloved guy, at least, as a guy on the bench. Forget his politics or sort of any role he's played previously in government. My sense here, and I have at least some level of insight, but I don't have this kind of on the record. My guess is you have a new city council president come in. She understands that she probably wants to make John Lombardi a judge. She and John Lombardi have a good relationship. By the way, Luis Aponte back in 2015 wanted to do this when he became the city council president, wanted to make Judge Lombardi the chief judge, and they couldn't get the votes, and there was some pushback from the Caprios, and everything kind of remained status quo to some degree. He became a judge, so he got something out of it. There is some level of this here, and if I'm the new city council president, I look at this and I say, boy, of all the things that I thought I was going to get into in my first month on the job, I didn't think a fight over the municipal court would be the thing that I'm getting in the headlines for and that I'm answering lots of questions about. Rachel Miller, being a pretty pragmatic person, I think looked at this and said, all right, there's a solution here. He doesn't have the votes to be the chief judge. I will create a new job. We'll give him a soft landing. He'll get to keep his show. And then we'll be able to make our people, the judges, be able to make Lombardi or whoever the chief judge. I think she was looking for a solution that kind of benefited everybody. And she's just run into now some challenges. Not that I don't think her colleagues are necessarily resistant to this. As I was told, she had run this by people and everybody was generally speaking on board with it. But, again, you see, okay, wait a minute, maybe we should ask a question about how much money is being made. By the way, they should ask. That's a completely legitimate thing for the city council to be questioning and to have questions about. So there's some hesitance. Then the rumor mill starts. Oh my God, they're making, so much money. And now there's a little bit of a hold on it, and the votes are a little bit up in the air. But I think Rachel Miller was kind of looking for a best of all world solution that, again, wouldn't cost. It's not like this cost the city millions of dollars or anything like that. And so I think that's where she was trying to go with it. It's gotten much bigger than she ever wanted it to.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. Definitely something to monitor in Roadmap and in the globe as a whole, and just in general. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. There was another story that it was during the holiday recess, so a lot of media people were off, but David Morales cast a vote for leadership that was in line with the mainstream, so to speak. He voted for the speaker, and he is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. He got a DSA endorsement, and there was pushback from the DSA basically saying, hey, look, our platform is that you don't vote for any entrenched politicians. You have to maintain this role of outsider status, so to speak. At the same time, pragmatic politics requires building coalitions. And Morales is somebody who I think, we've talked about this. He could be a mayor someday. He certainly has a political future. So looking at that as an example, do you think that's more of a lesson to whether it's the co-op, whether it's the DSA, even on the right, where there's kind of more entrenched in ideology type of organizations, is it more of a lesson to them to say, hey, look, you've got to be flexible. You've got to understand that politics is politics. Or do you think that's something that could come back to haunt Morales in the future, where the leftist coalition is larger than we necessarily give them credit for, especially in his district in Providence?
You know how at the beginning of this conversation you asked about what do you do in these non-election years and what are the big news? Just like we're in the media all kind of looking for our next interesting story, I think the people in politics are a little bored. Yeah. And this was just a way to like, let's rattle some cages from the left. I mean, David Morales, as you said, and I've written about, I think David Morales has one of the brightest futures of any progressive in politics. He's a guy who actually has gotten things done as a relatively new state representative. I think he looks like his district, and he looks like the city that he's in. I think he obviously speaks multiple languages. He's a smart kid right now, young man. I think he has a huge, bright future. I would, if you were asking me to make a short list of mayoral candidates in 4 or 8 years, let's say 8 years, assuming that usually you win re-election if you're Brett Smiley, I would put David Morales probably at the top of my list as potential, not just candidates, but potential winners of that race. And so too, for the Democratic Socialists to kind of, attempt to write him off. I mean, again, I think they got a little bored. I would never write off David Morales. And the thing about this is that one could say, well, if the mainstream media likes him, and if, the speaker likes him, that means that his values have changed. I mean, just talk to the guy. His values haven't changed at all. He doubles down and triples down on kind of where he stands on very, issues pretty far to the left that he strongly feels, is where Rhode Island and where the city should be going. So, I don't think this really comes back to bite him. You're not beating him. He's incredibly popular in his district. I wrote a column about him over the summer because he was involved in a a local professional wrestling.
The commissioner.
Yeah, he's the commissioner of the Renegade Wrestling Alliance. And, I talked to people at the match. The match was at Mount Pleasant High School, or Mount Pleasant Little League, excuse me. And my neighborhood's where I coach and it's where I live. And, went over there, and you're talking to people who said, yeah, I heard about this because of Representative Morales' newsletter that he sends out to constituents. People like him. They listen to him. They read his newsletter. They think he's interesting. So, I think it'd be really, really hard to beat him. And, if you just look at the way the politics tends to work out in Providence, I don't think you're going to have any candidate further to the left than David Morales. Sam Bell, they're in the same world. Rachel Miller, people are all kind of in the same class. I think people should kind of suck it up a little bit. David Morales actually wants to get things done at the State House. So voting for the speaker makes a level of sense. And when he, votes on something, on an issue that actually, goes against maybe his values, then you should hold him accountable. But
right.
I don't see any chance that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I remember being at the Crown Plaza when Joe Shekarchi was elevated to speaker and he got the votes, and outside members of the political cooperative were booing any candidates, Brandon Potter, or any electeds, Brandon Potter, June Speakman. These are progressives that were getting booed for that vote for speaker. On the one hand, I get it because it's like, hey, look, you have an ideology and you have a belief system that is, you're in on that and that alone. At the same time, the politics of reality require being able to forge those coalitions. And without them, what are you really going to do up there?
Yeah, I mean, by the way, the challenge here is, and the reality is, the people in power, Speaker Shekarchi especially, has a long memory, right? And if I had breakfast over the summer with Speaker Shekarchi when he was running for re-election, and I wanted to get some insight into how things were going, and we went to Warwick and we talked, and he himself brought up the fact that he had passed some bills that David Morales had supported, kind of as his example of, look, I can move to the left when there's people that I'm, that are willing to work with me. I get their bills passed. he literally points to David Morales as somebody that he was willing to work with. It goes the other way too. They don't, as much as they pretend that, elections are elections and then, you have to get to work. They all have a list of who doesn't support them, who said what on the Bill Bartholomew podcast, who, wrote this. They all have these lists. And so I think if you're a progressive up there, it doesn't mean you have to conform. But if Speaker Shekarchi didn't give you any reason to oppose him other than that he's powerful, it's really hard to make the case to vote against him, right? If you want to get anything done. I think it's a little different on the Senate side, where I think Dominic Ruggiero, first of all, has been there a really long time. He's from a much more conservative kind of class than Joe Shekarchi is, though Joe Shekarchi certainly lives in the moderate realm. I think it's reasonable for somebody like, let's say, a Sam Bell or other progressives up there to say, you know what, no matter what, I'm not with him. I think that makes more sense. He has a longer track record, all those things. But Joe Shekarchi hasn't exactly done anything to really piss off, I think, the progressives. And so why not give him a chance if you're also able to get some of your bills done?
Last area here is a major. We just came off of the State House homeless encampment. Obviously, there's a major crisis nationally with respect to homeless folks, unhoused folks. And there's not much that can be said about it other than hopefully people are doing the right thing to create more opportunity for whether it's shelter beds, temporary housing, permanent affordable housing. I mean, everyone has pretty much the same position on it, which is that homelessness is a horrible thing and we need to figure out ways to solve it. There's a lot of nuance to it. There's NIMBYism involved. There's a lot of zoning and other regulatory issues involved. There's personality clashes. But one thing that's jumped out is Josh Saul, the now housing department director. And there was a report that he was required to submit by law that he submitted late. There's an addendum that hasn't, or at least as of last week, was not included. Do you think Josh Saul and the housing crisis in general in the McKee administration is heading in the right direction, or are we heading towards a point where whether there's going to need to be a change of personnel or complete shift in direction that needs to take place sooner than later, so this doesn't get totally out of control for the McKee administration? Well,
Secretary Saul has not earned the respect of the leadership in the House or the Senate. That much is very clear. We've heard Joe Shekarchi be very critical of him. He hasn't really had incomplete grade, and said he hasn't really done anything yet. Senate President Ruggiero, I think, went even further and just said, I don't know what he's doing. I just know he's around always. So when you don't, and I think my colleague Alexa Gagas has written a lot of stories. She was one of the people that wrote about this report that was late to turn in, and then it was kind of copy and pasted. It looks a little half-assed in some ways. I think those raise all reasonable questions about whether or not he's the right person and what his future is going to look like. He's going to come under a lot of fire. One of the things that I do feel for him to some degree is that usually when we have a homelessness or housing challenge, everybody just points fingers at any number of people. I'm going to blame Crossroads. I'm going to blame the governor's office. I'm going to blame, this provider or that person or whatever. Now you actually have a face to blame. And so he has to eat it a little bit and actually show up. And I think he has not been very good when it comes to explaining his view of the world and his system and, how he is actually addressing things. So I think he needs to probably be get a little more out there, a little more trusting in the press, and make his point. I think that's separate to some degree from the governor. The governor, I think, falls more into what you were saying, that this is such a nuanced kind of challenge. It is not one where even if he wanted to, or even if he could, that you could, snap your fingers and do one thing to solve every problem. I think the NIMBYism situation, particularly around zoning, is one that potentially the state's going to have to address. Speaker Shekarchi seems like he's willing to, and that could mean, infringing in some ways on city and town rights, right? Could mean, passing something from the state level. I think the good news is that because Governor McKee is a former mayor and is somebody who, who has really good relationships with the municipal leaders, this is one where potentially this could be where he shines, right? Working with the cities and towns to say, hey, let's actually try to, figure this out so we don't have to impose this on you. I think that's a moment of opportunity for him. I think it's actually right in his sweet spot to actually be able to address. But, the governor's got a tough personality as well, and he thinks everyone's out to get him on every issue. And so it becomes, I think he becomes very defensive, whenever there's any criticism at all. I think they probably, again, I think this is one where he probably could play a huge role in it, especially when he has, a speaker who wants to make a huge difference.
Yeah. Dan McGowan, columnist for the Boston Globe, roadmap every single morning, the best way to start your day here in Rhode Island and beyond, and occasional fill-in host on WPRO. Is that fun for you?
Bill, I don't know how you guys do it more than once every 3 weeks, because I can't. I've gotten lucky. Every time that I come in, something big news breaks, and so I get lucky. But I don't know how to fill in if there isn't news on a given day.
It's an interesting art form, and I think it really is like this weird intersection of like performance and journalism that there's hardly anything like it, because you have to sustain. And it's funny because I had the same approach to it when I first started filling in. Like, all right, if there's no news, or more than anything, if I don't have a guest, then what do you do? And Andy Gresh, the great sports talk host, told me, he was like, you should try doing shows without any guests and without really any plan, and just see what happens. And I was like, well, that's going to be a disaster. And it was for a while. Maybe it still is, but there's something also about just like, all right, let's just imagine that we're not on the radio and we're just talking to a wall or a friend that like cares about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you have really like come into your own on it, and so it works really well. I feel like one of my favorite radio people in into the sports world is Colin Cowherd, who can carry a 3-hour show essentially by himself every day, and has done it for decades now. And what he always talks about is like he's just always talking to himself, right? If he's in the car, if he's on a run, and I will admit, I am usually talking to myself when, if I'm in the gym or if I'm, playing golf, like I'm thinking in my head, like what's an interesting angle. Usually it's for a column or to write about, but it kind of works the same way. But it is, for folks, taking you behind the scenes a little bit, as you're looking and you're kind of, when you're doing the radio show in real time, you're just waiting for someone to call in or to, send in a text message. And you're getting really nervous when it's not, because you worry maybe it's not resonating. Maybe people don't like it. It doesn't help that the text line at WPRO can be very vicious.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why we don't use it on the Dan York show. Dan, when that thing came out, Dan was like, this is a talk show. We're not going to have people. We're not just going to read text. And I don't want to see what, if you don't have the courage to call up and at least tell me, like me, Bill, on the other end, what you're thinking. And like, if you want to like rip me or rip Dan or whatever, then at least make the call. And so we got rid of the text line pretty quickly. But you're right. There's something about it that there's a point where Alex Weldon, he used to be Dan York's producer. Love
Alex, great guy.
Yeah, when I was filling in, he would come in between breaks, and he would just go, gotta carry, and that was like what he would tell me over and over again. It was like, all right, we have whatever the segment is, 12 minutes, you've got to carry it. If no one's going to call in, it's on you, or else people are going to listen to podcasts or sports talk or nothing.
Yeah. Well, I'm always worried that it also, when you fill in, usually it's going to come in times where like, it's not the most, a high listener, time of season. I got lucky the week before, or the week between Christmas and New Year's, because Chief Clements and Commissioner Perry, their news came out. But I recognize if I wasn't on the air, I wouldn't be listening to the radio. Right. And so, you're a little bit, you always have to keep that in mind. And it is, but it's fun. And the immediate feedback of it is really fun. And I'm kind of addicted to it in some ways. It reminds me a little bit of my newsletter to some degree, where it goes out to thousands and thousands of people every morning, whether it's good or not, I have no choice. And you immediately start to see your inbox fill up with, people telling you how to typo, or people telling you you're stupid, or some people telling you you're great. And that instant feedback, and the wide range of that feedback, I think actually has prepared me to fill in, because I don't get totally thrown off if somebody tells me I'm a dummy. There was a guy who told me, or I don't know if it was a guy or a woman, but who told me that both me and Jim Hummel, they should just play music instead of having us on the air. And I thought, oh, well, at least I'm in good company with Hummel.
Exactly, right. Probably the best talk show host that doesn't have a full-time show in the state right there, Jim Hummel. So
I think I'm talking to that person, Bill, but okay.
If you have a question for the show, send me an email, bill@ripodcast.com, and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. Just search for Bill Bartholomew.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.